Hey, thanks for joining us today. It's not often I get to interview someone with some tremendous expertise. And today I'm really happy to have a lady by the name of Peggy Sealfone on the show with us. Let me read a little bit of her bio. She is a personal development coach, an award-winning author, motivational speaker, podcaster, internationally recognized as an expert in mental wellness, and be able to help people in their anxiety. And she's able to really help people start to live the life that they really deserve to live. So I'm really pleased to have her on the show today. I know she's going to offer us some tremendous, tremendous insight that we can oftentimes apply to ourselves. So I look forward to having you join us.
At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Peggy, how are you doing?
I am doing fabulous, Doug. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So where do you live? Whereabouts in the country?
I am in Naples, Florida, on the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh,
on the
my
border of the Everglades.
goodness.
Beautiful area.
I'll bet your weather's decent right now.
Oh, it's beautiful.
You know what? It's cold and rain here in Utah. So
Woo!
big
I get
difference.
chills just thinking about that.
When I was reading a little bit about you, you had one comment that you made about how adversity leads to breakthroughs, and I think you've got an interesting story about how that has helped you to write a book that's coming out soon, right?
Actually, it's out.
Oh, okay, it's out.
It is out.
Okay, so tell the audience a little bit about Awakening and how did that come to be?
So the pandemic affected a lot of people last year, and I was one of them, and a lot of my clients. I do a lot of coaching of clients. And so I decided, because I live in such a beautiful area, I would make a video series of beautiful nature spots and kind of teach people about mindfulness in these locations. So I was videotaping on top of these boulders. There was a beautiful snowy white egret, and I was up there taking video. And when I turned to descend, I slipped and I didn't want to break my camera. So I fell all the way down and crushed my arm and multiple fractures. So right. And it's the middle of the pandemic. I don't want to go to the emergency room. I don't want to have surgery, but I had to have surgery. So I learned from being in pain, and also I was terrified of surgery because I've never had surgery in my entire life and I've broken other bones. And so I had to practice a lot of my own practices more diligently than ever to get me through that. I had a lot of pain, especially for the first month after surgery, because there was some nerve damage. And what all of a sudden happened out of nowhere is this story literally started downloading through my brain. And as I could start moving my arm and work at my keyboard again at my computer, I'd get up every morning and just characters would pop in and they would do things, and I would just write it all down. And it's really about a woman who's middle-aged and she has a terrible motorcycle accident. And I can relate because I've ridden motorcycles and had accidents,
Right.
broke my collarbone. But it's not a story about me. I don't know who it is. It's a woman named Robin, and it follows her journey as she wakes up from unconsciousness and starts questioning whether she's lived her life all wrong. And so it's her journey back into her past and trying to figure out, well, what do I do from here? And I've now won 3 book awards for it, which is just remarkable to me that this story just literally flew out in 10 weeks. And I'm just so excited to have it out there because it's not only a story about this woman, it's about friendships, it's about love, it's about navigating life and learning skills along the way. So I feel like a lot of my personal development coaching, a lot of the skills that I work with clients are really kind of infused, though, in a very subtle way throughout the book, not in a way that's off-putting or teachy. So it's a fun read, and it was really, I always wanted to do fiction and never had the time to do it. And actually my life partner, Patrick, was working all through this time when I was working on this book every day. And he would come home from work and say, Peggy, I'm really worried about you. You're spending way too much time by yourself. And I'd look at him in all seriousness and I'd say, Patrick, I'm having a fabulous time with all these people. I'm traveling all over the world with them. And I literally was living in this fantasy world. It was so fun.
Oh, that is so cool. And you've written a number of books. I think one that I had looked at, Escape from Anxiety. Now that's not fiction. That's something much different, isn't it?
Way different. And that one was really out of the fact that I'm trained in so many different traditions. So I trained with world masters in Eastern traditions and Western traditions. So I have a lot of different tools and techniques, and a lot of them I incorporated into this book. There's over 100 different strategies to interrupt patterns of anxiety and stress, and to be able to supercharge your life, to be able to really live life more effortlessly. And again, as we started, adversity to me really helps propel you into being motivated to find better solutions for yourself and to find more of yourself, rather than camouflaging it through showing up thinking, well, I'm supposed to be this way, or someone told me I'm that. No, you find out who you are, so you don't grow from your comfort zone.
And it's interesting. I'm very involved in behavioral analysis and personality profiling. And it's interesting what you just say there, because so many of us, and I'm one of them, we get caught up in how are we supposed to behave, quote, based on parents, teachers, environment, whatever that happens to be. And that's not bad in and of itself, I don't think, when you consciously walk into a situation and go, okay, based on what's going on here, here's how I need to work socially. And that's kind of the social personality, because there really are three, as you know. But what I find interesting is so many people find themselves in that social situation, which is life in general, and they're not in control of that. They are literally the effect of the environment, of the imprints, of the attachment subconsciously, all of those types of things. And as you say, they're living a life that really is not theirs.
Well, and it's so important to recognize that. And I love that you're doing that type of work, because I think it's so effective. And what happens so often with so many of us is we get convinced in the story that we've been told about ourselves, and it's not real. And then we get in conflict with that story because it isn't really who we are. And so that's the journey. That it's the journey. And what I do a lot in my work, and for myself as well, is, finding more facets of myself that got hidden because of all those past messages and past experiences and past relationships that have nothing to do with right now.
Well, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and look at your life and go, this isn't who I want to be. This is not the outcome I wanted from life. It's fascinating. As I was looking at your bio, what's interesting, and I love the comment because it reminds me of a comment I got from someone, last week, actually. We were talking about different things, and particularly this, working with people, and the comment was, you know what, it would be great if you wanted to go back and get, your master's degree in psychology. And I looked at her and she goes, I know you already probably in many respects don't need that. And I'm going, yes. And I'm laughing because one of your comments is you have a PhD. But what is that PhD in?
Oh, yeah, I love that lead in. Thank you, Doug. That's so funny. I love it. Yes. Well, I feel like I've lived a lot of lives. And so I have a PhD in reinventing myself. And I've gone from being a journalist in New York City, writing for the New York Times and Newsweek International, to owning retail businesses, to owning an advertising agency, to this wellness spectrum. And so much of what I did in the past actually led me towards this path for myself. I needed to find better solutions. I was facing lots of adversities along the way and had to figure out solutions. And as I found solutions for myself, I found them so transformational that I wanted to share them with others and inspire others and realize we don't have to struggle. We don't have to suffer. It's truly a choice. And once you build the skills and the resiliency that's really available, so available, it's like free energy, you can really change your life and live so much more fully.
Well, and I love what you say about the fact that adversity sometimes finally awakens us to the fact that, okay, something isn't right here and I need to change it. And, I've been looking at that very carefully. I like the concept of, you talk about mindset, and I've talked about that, mindfulness and awareness. And I think for me, as I've looked at that, we all go through the situation, but at what point in time do we suddenly become aware that this life that I'm leading is not my life? I'm living someone else's life, or I'm living multiple people's lives because of all the imprints and everything that is coming in. And as I've been researching that out, and I saw a little bit on your video and on your bio and also on the website, you really have a fascination with neurosciences.
Oh, totally.
Okay, so I want to talk about that a little bit, because I think one of the biggest challenges that people face, number one, is to be aware. And as you know, there are so many of us out there that literally, and us, I'm not including you, but I'm including me, that, oftentimes we're just not aware of what is it? What is that motivation subconsciously, or whatever it is that's causing us to respond, to react, to behave in a certain way, to live our lives in a certain way, when in fact, when we look at the outcome of those, it's not what we want. And I think the biggest challenge sometimes, and I want to get your thought on this, is people may be aware of that and may, suddenly recognize that. But the challenge is, how do I change? And as you know, change is one of the greatest fears for individuals. But how do I change, number one? But number two, how on earth did I get to this point? And can I change? And can that change be permanent? What are your thoughts?
Great conversation. I think it's so important for each one of us to constantly take stock. Too many of us, as you point out, we've gotten messages from the past. We're living these old stories, which are really myths. It's not who we are. A parent says to a child when they're 8 years old, oh, you just didn't clean your room well. You're just never going to amount to anything. And that becomes a lifelong belief. I work with clients who are in their 50s and 60s, and they still believe these old stories that they got from their parents. So they're living in the past. And so mindfulness is a fantastic opportunity to bring yourself into the present. Don't live in the past. Stop fearing or being anxious about the future, but be right here, right now. And as John Kabat-Zinn says, pay attention on purpose, as if your life depends on it, without any judgment. So if you're really present right here in this moment, look at your thoughts. What are you thinking in this moment? Over the time that we spend together today, just on the show, we each have over 2,000 thoughts running through our brains. And sadly, many of those thoughts, again, have been patterned neurologically from the past and have become these neural pathways that we believe and that exist over and over again. And I work with a lot of people with stress and anxiety in particular. Mm-hmm. And that's actually a behavioral pattern that creates a neural pathway. So when you get triggered by a situation that's challenging for you in any way, boom, you default back to that stress response or that anxiety response, because that's part of the neural pathway. So what I teach people to do is what I call interrupters, to really learn active, intentional skills that you can mindfully implement at any point that you're feeling upset or anxious or negative or angry or insecure, any of those kinds of things, you can interrupt and start building new neural pathways. So then as you build these new pathways, when you are again triggered by something, you become more neutral. You become more able to see creative solutions rather than getting stuck in the reaction. So you respond rather than go into this spiral of fear and anxiety and worry and self-destruction, because all of those things are really bad for our health, all of those negative feelings.
You respond rather than react.
Exactly.
And that's the difference between being at the effect of your environment and your subconscious versus being in control. And I think that's really interesting. And I think for a lot of people, and I could be wrong, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but for a lot of people, the greatest fear they have is that they cannot change. That regardless of what they've tried, and you comment about a parent maybe making a comment of, what, you're just never ever going to, end up doing anything. You just can't change. You're just going to be who you are. And I think for people, part of that fear can be alleviated, understanding, and not everybody is scientific and so forth. But when we talk about neural pathways, we're really talking about habits, aren't we?
Exactly. Patterns, just behavioral patterns.
And these are behavioral patterns that we don't even recognize. They are just habits and patterns. And for me, I think what's interesting is science now has gotten to the point where they have shown that, as you had said, you literally can, I don't know if you can change the neural pathways. I've heard different opinions on that, but for sure you can set aside those pathways that have been not positive for you and minimize them as you create new ones. And when you talk about that, when you talk about epigenetics, and recognize that sometimes, in fact, I laugh about that, but sometimes we respond in a particular way to our DNA and to whatever it happens to be, not because we're in control, but it's because we picked that up genetically from one of our ancestors. And I don't know how far back that can go, but I suspect 3 or 4 generations at least, if not longer.
I have a different philosophy about that.
Okay, I'm waiting to hear it. That's why I brought it up.
So epigenetics is basically how your genes are programmed. However, they never have to turn on. Someone whose parents, grandparents had cancer, they live their adult life fearing that they're going to get cancer because that's their heredity, that's in their genes. Yes, it may be in your genes, but it never has to turn on. So how do you keep those negative things from turning on? You practice mindfulness, making better choices in your life as far as all the different components, sleeping enough, getting the right foods, getting exercise, just basic human behavior that allows us to show up and be healthier and happier. And one of the biggest causes of these imbalances and these stressors are these triggers that we don't know how to manage. So we get anxious, and that creates tension in the body that shuts the body down from working properly. In fact, with stress, when you have that reaction to stress, there's literally a hormonal release of cortisol and adrenaline that makes the heart race really fast and sends energy down into your extremities so you can run away from the danger or be able to fight the danger. Typically a Bengal tiger is chasing you, right?
Right.
But in these days, it's our thoughts that are chasing us and we're reacting to it and we're getting tense. And the point is, stress is a biological phenomenon that's built into our system for survival. So once we experience the stress, we're supposed to, survive and then recover from the stress. What happens is we live in that state of stress. And what stress does, it's sending the energies to the extremities. It's taking it away from our digestion. It's taking it away from our immune system. So now we're getting sick, we're getting headaches, we're getting indigestion, we're getting all of these physical ailments because we're not aware, we're not being mindful, and we're not practicing things that can help change that behavior.
Okay. And by the way, I do not disagree with you, what you were talking about epigenetics, because in fact, you can either minimize it or even change it. And I think science is showing that you can change it. I have a great example in my own family. From what I understand, my dad, growing up, his dad came in from Norway, and every once in a while I got a hunch my dad misbehaved and he got belted. I mean, he had a belt taken to him. And I suspect that my grandfather had the same thing happen to him, and so on and so forth, in the old country over in Norway. And I watched my dad, and as I grew older and started to understand the parenting and so on and so forth, we never got touched. We never got really spanked. We definitely never had a belt or anything taken to us. And he literally, by changing his behavior, changed the epigenetics of that particular situation on all of my four brothers and my sister. None of us have ever taken anything to any of our children. And the spanking, if anything, is just, spanking ourselves because we didn't teach them right. But the bottom line is that we can change that. And I think that becomes key, is to understanding that regardless, it doesn't matter whether it's been the environment or your parents or your school or your religion or whatever it happens to be, or epigenetics, you can change this as long as you understand that, yes, your brain is adaptable to the point where you can really take that quote habit that you don't want to have behaviorally, and you can change that and develop a new habit, a neural pathway to the point where you're living an entirely different type of life. And as you say, supercharge your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see, though, epigenetics being much more gene structure and less behavior, because in a lot of clients I see stress and anxiety actually a conditioning and a behavioral. It's less epigenetics and more behavioral, that they're teaching their kids to be anxious and how to react with stress, rather than teaching their kids to be calmer and to be more peaceful and to see solutions so they don't have to be so anxious about it. And the other thing that you mentioned, though, the generational, this is a little esoteric, but I do believe that we're all energy. The world, everything vibrates at different frequencies. And I feel some of these generational experiences are actually passed down energetically. So there is something that's kind of built into our systems, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily epigenetics. Epigenetics is more gene structure. And I just want to tell you a quick story about epigenetics and how you can really change it.
Okay.
It's one of the things that I've trained in that really kind of blew my mind. It's a program called Yoga Nidra, which is a yogic sleep. It takes you into very, very deep levels of relaxation for 20, 30 minutes. You go into these real alpha, theta, delta states where you restore, recover, rejuvenate. And there was a study done, this goes back probably 25 years ago, Herbert Benson, that was at Harvard at the time, and he did a study on the stress response. And he took people who had never done any kind of relaxation experience, and he took all their vital statistics ahead of time, then taught them a kind of meditation relaxation experience, asked them to practice it 20 minutes a day for 8 weeks. At the end of 8 weeks, he retested them. He found that over 1,560 genes were expressed more healthfully in their bodies. So I'm convinced that, again, Yoga Nidra is a relaxation response, integrated relaxation. And doing it over periods of time, I've worked with patients of doctors who've had different illnesses, and I've been able to really help mitigate those imbalances that created those illnesses. So we have the power to change the epigenetics. We have the power to change our behavior. We have the power to change our minds. We have the power to change our lives. And there's so many opportunities. And I feel like I love your whole program of inspiration, because I think that a lot of people sort of feel like, well, no, but I'm stuck. You don't understand my situation. I'm suffering here. I have all these responsibilities. That's all excuses. That's still all old stories that they're living in. There are great opportunities And it's just important to take that first step and just begin by being mindful about what thoughts you're thinking, and change your brain by brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. Something as simple as that can begin to change your patterns.
And it's not easy. I have fun sometimes when someone says, "Oh, look what that's happening to me, and look what they're doing to me, and look what's happening," and so forth. And I say, "Look, do you have a mirror?" "Yeah." I said, "Just take that mirror, put it up in front of you, look at yourself. Now you know what the cause is." Because bottom line is, you can't blame anyone else other than yourself. And, that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to be able to look at a situation and go, okay, I recognize that whatever's going on, I have control of, but I don't know how to control this. I think this is particularly true in relationships where you have that situation of abuse and all of that type of thing. The fear of the unknown is sometimes greater than the fear of the present. And how do you help people to overcome that fear?
That's a really good point. And you mentioned it earlier too. So it's something we really need to address, that fear of change. I think people, again, almost get comfortable with their discomforts. In other words, like I work with one of my clients suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And she can be free of that. And yet, because she's lived with it so long, she keeps looking for it because it's a comfort level for her. Even though it's something she no longer wants and doesn't want to feel that way, she keeps looking for it because she's so used to it being there. So I think it does take a little bit of courage, maybe a lot of courage, to begin to address what you can do to change what isn't working in your life. And the bottom line is there is no failure. There's this old Japanese proverb that says, fall down 7 times, get up 8 times. Just keep going, keep trying, keep experimenting. And I will tell you the other thing that I use a lot myself, and I teach this a lot to my clients, is that whenever bad things happen, like when I broke my arm, my first question was not woe is me or what am I going to do about it? My first question to myself was, what am I going to learn from this? I had this for a reason. What am I going to get out of it that I'm going to benefit from in some positive way? I'm going to learn something. And I ended up writing Awakening, a novel. So it's a mindset that helps set you up for openings that allow you to attract the things to you that you want in your life. For instance, with relationships, I so often talk to people about, you have to look at you in terms of what you have within yourself that you want to give to someone else, not what can you get from that someone else. So it's important to look at, would I want to be in a relationship with me? Do I have enough to offer someone? Do I care enough about myself, my well-being, giving back to my community, my country, my universe? Or do I just want? What can I get? No, it's really about what can I give? And giving is the greatest pleasure. And that's the other thing, just to kind of go back to something you said earlier, because you said so many things that I've wanted to comment on, and I've made little notes here, but I can't remember all of them.
I'm guilty of that. I am aware of that.
I love it though.
That's the first step.
I love your perceptions and well, just the work you do, I think is fabulous. But it's the whole idea that, look, as human beings, we really seek pleasure. And we really do not want pain. So in many cases, that kind of guides us into taking a path of least resistance, because resistance or change does take a little bit of work and courage, as you point out. And so that can be temporarily a little painful, but the rewards are just enormous. And I like to think of it more as an adventure. So rather than worrying about, well, am I doing this right? Or is this the good approach? It's really more about, well, let me try this. Let's see how this feels, or how this works for me, or how I can help someone else, and that'll help me feel better.
Well, and you have a lot of things in your toolbox, from energy, from NLP, from all of these types of things. And as we look at literally, because in my mind, this is changing the brain. I mean, literally what we are doing is we are changing our brain so that we no longer experience what we've been experiencing. It's just a matter of consciously doing that. And so as we do that, here's the question that always comes to my mind is as we work with people, as we want them to actually change those habits and change those neural pathways so that they can start to minimize the reactivity and start to really experience the responsibility and the response and the control in our lives. Have you found that there are any specifics that are more effective? For instance, when we're trying to build that neural pathway, can you use NLP and go back and identify some of these experiences in their early childhood or later on, where you're able to reframe that, where they're able to come out of that and recognize that, you know what, their perception was never correct in that situation. And now that they're adults, a little bit more mature and more conscious, they can see how that was really changed. And I know I've seen that happen in my own clients where that makes such a huge difference for them. Is that changing neural pathways? Or do you find that there are a lot of activities and very specific focuses that an individual can take based on you coaching them, that ultimately, because they continue to do that and do that and do that enough times, that's where they're changing the neural pathways? Or is it a combination of both? Or is it energy healing? Or what has been your experience?
All of the above. It's interesting. And I'm kind of grateful that I'm such a curious person and that I've trained in so many different modalities.
Yes.
Because different people respond differently to different programs. So I really don't do a one size fits all, because everybody has different perceptions, different pasts, maybe different cultural biases, whatever it is. It's really important to meet people where they are. And one of the things that I'm also grateful for is I'm a bit clairsentient. So I kind of feel intuitively what people need pretty quickly. So I usually can drill down, but I'll tell you a quick example. One of the things that I use a lot with everyone, because it's the quickest way to get present and to calm the nerves and to just, create a sense of peacefulness, is some deep breathing techniques. And I recently worked with a client and I was teaching her this deep breathing technique, and she actually gets nervous breathing. Breathing is an issue for her. So I had to change. That wasn't going to work for her, because that's the quickest. You don't have to go anywhere. It's all built into your anatomy, right? You just pause, take a nice deep breath or a big sigh, and that signals the nervous system to calm down. Well, she couldn't do that. It made her more nervous. So the other thing that's very simple that she has with her is a vocal box. And in the back of the neck, there's a nerve that runs there that if you can get it to vibrate, that can also signal the nervous system to calm down. And one of the ways to make it vibrate is to hum or sing. So now whenever I talk to her, she says, "Oh, I'm humming through every day now. I'm doing great." So she hums a lot. It's the vagus nerve that goes through the back of the neck, and humming. And so, like I've trained with world-renowned yogi masters, and in yoga, they om a lot, the om. And, when you realize what that's doing, it's exactly what's happening. That's why that's so peaceful, to bring you into that state of tranquility and serenity just by oming.
Well, and I think it's interesting for people to understand, as you say, people respond differently. I am very left brain, totally left brain. And so try to get me to meditate, try to get me to go my ohms and everything. I don't experience it. But go in and do some kind of, some type of situation where you take me back and help me to identify experiences and reframe those a little bit. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, I get that now. So I think a lot of it has to do with personality. Where are you on that personality scale? Your right brain, left brain, introvert, extrovert, a combination of this and that, and so on and so forth. And what fascinates me and what I appreciate about what you're saying is you have to have the ability to try something, and the people need to understand, hey, we're going to try this. If it doesn't work, we're going to try something different. Yes, we have a solution. We just need to figure out what resonates with you.
That's exactly it. And actually, it's funny that you say that about meditating, because before COVID, I was doing a lot of big corporate groups because I'm a motivational speaker. And so I had a room full of 200 men, CEOs of companies. That I think there were 3 women in the whole crowd. And so I wanted to teach them a quick calming technique. So I called it a productivity pause, and they paid attention. So it wasn't like meditation or breathing. Of course, that's what it ended up kind of being. But they kind of sat up and, oh, I can be more productive. Okay, I'm in. I'll sign up. How do I do that? And so they paid attention and they were able to get a skill. And it's just so simple. Whereas what you're talking about is incredibly effective. And it's so good to be able to do neurolinguistic programming. But it takes, you can't do it on your own. It takes someone guiding you through that experience and helping you to understand it. Whereas breathing, humming, I've got that. I can do that any minute of any day.
Well, and I think you bring up an interesting point. There are many things we can do to help us. Once we become mindful, once we become aware, once we realize that, whatever's going on here is not really doing me good service. And I've got to change that. I've got to change those experiences, or at least the perception of those experiences, or just eliminate it, basically. So as you talk about that, that's an easy thing to do if you have help.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think that, to me, I think one of my pet peeves, and I have to be real careful here because I certainly honor and respect everyone that's involved in helping people, psychology, psychiatry, all of those types of things. What I found interesting as I've talked to other people and many psychologists is that it's one thing to just talk and talk and talk and talk ad nauseum, and you never ever get the result. When I had my dental practice years ago, I really had a fascination with chronic pain in the head and neck area. And so I had the pleasure and the privilege of training with a lady back in Washington, D.C., who actually wrote the book on trigger point myotherapy, was President Kennedy's physician, and so on and so forth. And it was interesting because then patients would come in and they'll go, and this was a terminology. You know what? I have TMJ, doctor. And I'm looking at him, I'm going, all right. And TMJ stands for temporal mandibular joint. I have TMJ, and I'm going, wait a minute. No, you have 2. You got one on the left, you got one on the right. So now tell me, what are your symptoms? And I can't tell you how many dentists were treating, quote, TMJ by building an appliance, by doing this, by doing surgery, on and on and on and on and on. And they never got to the root cause of what was causing that. And most of the time it had to do with a neuromuscular situation where you could go in and inject, take care of that muscle spasm, maybe change the relationship that they have, temporarily, so that muscles could relax. But the bottom line was that really got me going to where, don't tell me what's happening. I want to know what the symptoms are. Don't give me pills. Don't give me this. Don't give me that. What are my symptoms, and how do I change those symptoms? How do you take that muscle, which is causing me such pain, and correct it? And it's kind of what you're doing now is you're looking at these things and going, okay, what are the root causes of your anxiety? What are the root causes of your habits that you really don't want to have?
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I'm grateful that I got a chance to study with Dr. Mark Hyman in functional medicine and functional nutrition, because the approach to well-being is completely different from Western medicine. Yes, we take tests and we find out, the basic situations on a test level, but it's really about looking, as you say, at root causes. What got you to this point now? If you just treat the symptoms, you're just putting Band-Aids on a much deeper problem. And it's going to come back in a different way because you haven't gotten to the root cause. And again, in many of the situations that I deal with, the root cause are, anxieties and stresses that people aren't addressing, and they're not learning how to mitigate those patterns that are really compromising their lives profoundly and deeply. And just to know that once you drill down and look, let's face it, there are simple techniques that help you interrupt patterns in the moment, but to really drill down to the source and really change things sustainably, it does help to have the guidance of someone who's knowledgeable and can really work with you to see what resonates and to see. And that's why, like when I work with clients, yes, I'll sometimes just do one session. That's what they want. But I really prefer doing something a little bit more ongoing and not for a long time. I try to empower clients to use techniques to be empowered on their own. But sometimes they need some hand holding because I'll give them certain techniques to practice over 4 or 5 days. And they come back to me and they said, I didn't really feel like I was doing it right. And so we can in real time address how things worked or didn't work and alter it and adjust it so that it really works for them. But it really has to be a core thing because we each have such amazing abilities and are way more expansive than we realize. But we block our expansiveness and our own capabilities with all these tensions and all these external influences that we've accepted. We have to stop that. We have to go within, find who we are, and own who we are. We each have gifts to give. And so finding that is the joy and the adventure. And it also, when you find what you love doing, whether it's work or even in relationships, it's effortless. It becomes so joyful because it's easy. And now you can be fully engaged in whatever it is you're doing because you've kind of found yourself and the secrets of supercharging your life and being who you are.
Well, and oftentimes what happens though, is you go back and you start looking at those things. And I think one of the things that people face is this concept of shame and blame that, they're going back, but whatever they're thinking about, whatever they're looking back in past life, they've been taught the shame, this blame situation. And I think oftentimes that becomes a barrier for them to be able to actually experience what they need to be experiencing. How do you help them to overcome that shame and blame?
Oftentimes it's really about getting present. In the present, is there shame or blame? What's going on right now in this moment that you should feel shameful or that you should be blaming or be blamed? Really activating this moment and tuning into yourself. So a lot of times it's also a matter of just making good lifestyle choices for yourself, doing things for yourself that are gratifying for you. Sometimes it's helping others. Sometimes it might be just self-care things. Going for a walk in nature is a great way to decompress and really be present in the moment. When I walk on the Gulf of Mexico on these white sandy beaches here in Naples, Florida, there's no way in that moment that I could feel shame, blame, guilt, anger, anything. I'm just at peace and it's calm and beautiful. And one of the other key ways, and I actually have a meditation on my website, is to feel grateful. Even though things have happened, okay, you're looking at situations that have been disturbing in some way, but right now, look at what you can be grateful for. If you have a place to live, if you're able to do something you love doing, whether it's a hobby or whether it's your work, whether you can cultivate relationships in ways that are gratifying. We're social animals. It's important to be with others and interact and feel supported and be able to support them. So what are some things you can be grateful for right in this moment? And when you feel grateful, gratefulness is a very high vibrational frequency, as is love. And things like blame, shame, anger, guilt, those are all very low vibrational frequencies. And when you feel those kinds of frequencies, they can actually get stuck and create tensions and blockages in your body. So you really want to get rid of them. Another typical way I help people do that is just through some basic breathing techniques of breathing out the old to open up to bring in the new.
Okay, you're going to have to help me right now because I've just been feeling a lot of shame because I literally committed a sin while we were talking. And that, as you were talking about Naples and the beautiful beaches, I started to covet. Okay, so I think what's interesting, depending on our backgrounds and so forth, of course, obviously you recognize that I'm kind of making a joke of this, but I don't mean to be, because it's serious. People who have come in with a particular background find themselves blaming themselves, feeling ashamed, just because, I've read the Bible and I know coveting is sin, and you're just telling me about your place, and I'm sitting here looking outside and it's raining and I'm going, oh, I'd love to be on those beautiful beaches. It's an interesting.
But my point is to find them what is working for you and what's good for you. So I'm sure you have a park nearby or beautiful mountains or some place that is part of nature, and go walk in the rain. There's nothing wrong. There's something very freeing about that. That could be a cool experience. I'll come and do it with you.
Well, and I love what you said about gratitude. I think that it's amazing how gratitude can change our entire mindset. And yes, am I appreciative of where I live? Absolutely. But it's the mindset of gratitude, being grateful. And I loved what you said when something comes up where, like, you broke your arm or like, whatever is going on, what can we be grateful for? And that changes that mindset to the point where we start to come out of those negative aspects. Now, we have very little time left, but I want you to talk a little bit about what your new series is called Mind and Body Fitness for Life, because I know you're working on that project. Let's just take a few minutes if you'd share with the audience.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about it because it's really bringing an even deeper dive into the Supercharge Your Life concept. So it's really about mastering your mind, mastering your body. We so often live in our minds with all these thoughts that we have, and that terrorizes the body sometimes with the stresses and the tensions. And so it's really important that we integrate. And when we can integrate mind and body, we really enter the zone where life becomes effortless. So I'm offering a series of programs on mind and body fitness for life. And the very first one that I'm launching really soon is Feel Fitter, Healthier, and Lighter in only 14 days. So it's a 14-day program of really creating better lifestyle choices. You may well lose weight on it. So it's a good time before the big holiday to get on track with that. I'm offering it again in January. So it's on my website, mindbodyfitnessforlife.com. And come sign up and be guided. It's really interactive. You'll get directions basically every day on things that you can do, great recipes, great movement opportunities, inspiration. Plus we have a Facebook group that's private that we can interact on. So it's really to have fun, but to get healthier and better, and to hopefully create new neural pathways, new behaviors that you'll like so much that you'll continue.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Peggy, this has been a wonderful discussion. I really appreciate what you're doing and how obviously you're helping a number of people and just writing your books and doing all of that. So I appreciate you being on the show.
Oh, thank you, Doug. And I appreciate you and all the work you're doing. And thank you for the opportunity to share what I know with you and your listeners. So thank you so much, Doug.
Remind the audience one more time, how do they find you?
So my website is peggysealfon.com, or they can go on to mindbodyfitnessforlife.com, and that'll take them into into my website that way. And I'm also on Facebook, just Peggy Sealfon, personal development coach. I'm on Instagram under my name. So there's lots of different ways. Best way is the website. Lots of free
Perfect.
information there, as well as programs. And I just came out with a whole new series of inspirational affirmation greeting cards, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, wow. Great. Well, thank you so much. And folks, thanks so much for listening today. I'm sure you got something really good out of this, and hope you'll join us again soon. Meanwhile, this is Dr. Doug wishing you a wonderful and a grateful and just a beautiful, blessed week.